everybody. If you've hung out with me before, welcome back. If this is your first time here, my name is Avon Van Hassel. I write fairy tale retellings and historical fantasy, and the first 3 books of my series, the Beanseller Saga, are available on Amazon for Kindle and paperback. And today, we're talking about something I'm very excited about from the backstory of Avon, the lore today. One thing I love is back to school. Now, I was not a good student, but I loved going back to school. I particularly loved back to school shopping because I was just sure that that new binder, Trapper Keepers because I'm that old, or like the themed notebooks or the highlighters or the whatever was going to fix me. And that never happened. It still doesn't happen. And it's been a long time since I was a student, or since I even needed, like, office supplies, because my entire business is digital, but I still get so excited around back-to-school time, and, like, all the new office supplies that are for sure gonna fix me this time. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun, in September, to talk a little bit about what education was like in this era, which is the era of my books, which is the late 1700s, early 1800s. And to help me with this, I have a special little friend, Miss Felicity Merriman. Now, it would surprise almost nobody to know that I was the biggest American Girl fan. And in fact, I bought Miss Felicity to take with me to university. And the irony of taking Felicity, of all people, to the UK with me was not lost on me at the time. However, I already had Samantha, and Felicity was my second favorite forever, so I had to have her. And I thought getting into the university of my dreams was a good enough excuse to get her. So, what's interesting, though, is that her story is from this era, so some of her experiences in life are relevant to what we're talking about here, and today especially. So, if you're not familiar, the American Girl series is a series of books from mostly the 90s. I mean, they still exist, but they kind of exist in a different way now. Where you had a number of girls, originally it was 5, who lived in different eras of American history, and they dealt with different social and political challenges. And one thing I always loved about the series is that it didn't dumb it down for children. The age range was like 8 to 12. It was kind of in that, like, just starting to understand what's going on in the world. And it kind of didn't shy away from the fact that children in the past had to deal with some pretty heavy shit. This one had to deal with her parents are patriots in the New England colonies before the Revolution, so they had to deal with being out of step with the local government. There was a girl who escaped slavery. There was a girl whose father was in World War II. So, one of the girls was an orphan, so she already had to deal with the death of her parents. There was one girl who fought a bear. So, they dealt with some stuff. And it portrays these things in a way that makes it easy for children to understand, but it doesn't shy away from the grim realities of what children have always had to put up with in the real world. They don't sugarcoat it for the kids, which I like. And they always have a strong girl, and I always think that they're a great example of what strong female characters can be, because they withstand all of these challenges, and they succeed, and they don't lose their humanity. They don't lose their caring hearts. They don't lose their wildness. They don't lose their determination and whatever. They're not hardened by the world. They keep who they are as people while navigating these difficult times in history. And I think that's a message that we can still get behind, is that, yeah, shitty things are happening, but, you don't have to succumb to it. So, I just really, really love this series, and I still do. In fact, one of the first times that I put myself into credit card debt as an adult was collecting some vintage Samantha stuff, so it continues to be a problem. But it's a good one. There are worse problems to have, I think, than educational children's book series of strong young girls. So, but today we are going to be talking about a little bit of something that has the little crossover there. And it's fun to recognize that, in previous videos, like the coffee houses and Capability Brown, I was talking about the Enlightenment and how this is an era where people were really thinking hard about a lot of things. They were thinking about culture and their place in history. They were thinking about the roles of kings, the roles of women, the roles of religion. And this actually extended to children as well. The education of children has always been really important because people are sentimental about their children, and it's instinctual to want to set them up for adulthood and also to prime the next generation of adults who are going to be running the world, right? But it's interesting that during the Enlightenment, that spirit of enlightenment did extend to children as well. And this is well past the invention of the printing press. But for some reason, people have this feeling that because the printing press existed, that widespread literacy did. And that's just not true, because it was still very expensive to print things. And so still very few people had printed things. And so the literacy rate was still relatively low. You still needed to be of a certain class to have, first of all, have leisure time to read and to be taught to read. A lot of times children were put to work very early in the less affluent classes. And so you needed tutors and things to be able to take time out to teach you. But during this period, it did kind of seem to be felt that, well, no, maybe we should be teaching these kids to read as well. And just because, even then, just because a lot of people can read doesn't mean they know how to read, if you know what I mean. So literacy in the literal sense doesn't necessarily mean you understand what you're reading. But it's the first step. You need to be able to teach people to recognize the letters and the words in order to be able to actually have a think about what they're reading. And this led to the invention of something called an abecedaria, which is a real word. I swear to God it is. And it's amazing. An abecedaria basically is a device that teaches you the alphabet. And this is the first step. So you have to be able to recognize the shapes of the letters, uppercase and lowercase, as well as how they fit together to make words. And it seems pretty simple at first, right? You think about little building blocks, right? But it's actually really complex because letters themselves don't look the same as when you write them. No matter how you try, you're going to write differently. And so this begins the advent of handwriting in the child's mind. They start to learn about penmanship versus printing. Also, this is a time when people were using quills. They were using free-flowing ink. So that's why everybody used cursive, because if you pick up your pen and put it back down, you're going to get those ink blots. And this kind of fell out of fashion around the time that the ballpoint pen was invented, because you didn't have that free-flowing ink anymore, which is why cursive is slowly being phased out. It's not because kids these days, it's because tech these days who uses free-flowing ink anymore, except for me. So so it's about how the shapes change, but you still need to be able to recognize printed media and be able to read it, as well as written media. And then you would have someone guiding you in how to put them together to make words and all of that. So it is actually pretty sophisticated in terms of how you use it to learn and how you use it to teach. And then we have that kind of translates into something more concrete that we're going to be talking about today, called the hornbook. And what a hornbook is it's a wooden paddle, usually wood, sometimes metal, like lead or tin or whatever. And it would have a sheet of paper that had the letters of the alphabet written out, as well as a little piece of text. So the classic example is the alphabet and like the Lord's Prayer. The idea is just that you want to see how words go together, just as an example. And it's something that children should be able to recognize and replicate. And then that piece of paper is covered with a thin layer of horn, like animal horn, that has been shaved and flattened. Although sometimes it could be mica, sometimes it could be a thin sheet of vellum, something more or less waterproof, and then bolted down, stapled down. So it's basically just something solid and durable than the actual teachable piece of literature, and then laminated, basically. And then sometimes it would have like a little hole drilled in with a piece of string so that a child could carry it around with them. So very often you would have like a governess or a tutor or something like that who would teach the children how to read. But in this era, we start to see the beginning of public schools. We start to see children being taken out of the home, taken somewhere else. And it would sometimes be like a woman in town would have a little school that she would teach the girls out of, or the parson would teach the boys. So you have children removed from the house, taken to somewhere else, and having a professional person teaching them to do these skills. And so that also added a little bit of a kind of class mingling as well, because it was really more about educating children rather than training up the next generation of lords and ladies. So it's becoming a little more egalitarian and democratic in the actual sphere of education, which is very cool. And actually, about this era, hornbooks are starting to fall out of fashion, because this is also about the era when we start getting into dedicated children's literature, which is fun. Before this, we didn't really have books and stories written specifically for children. And so by about the era when Felicity would be using a hornbook, or when my stories are written, hornbooks are kind of on the way out, but they are still kind of there. And what's interesting is that in about the 30s was really when people started, like the 1930s, was when people really started to see childhood as an important period of development, and really started to get sentimental about childhood things. So it's really difficult to find an authentic hornbook from the era, because people just didn't hold on to children's things. They were like passed down to the next generation, or they were just simply thrown away when they weren't useful enough or useful anymore, because people just weren't sentimental about children's stuff as much as they are now. So they're pretty rare. So what I have for you is, in the second book, Felicity Learns a Lesson. We actually see her on the cover that she has a little hornbook. And so this is about her. And of course, whatever it's about in these books is never actually what it's about. So this is supposed to be about school, but it's really about tea, because it's always about tea. So there's a little illustration of the hornbook. And then at the end of these books, there's always the looking back, a peek into the past section. And on the very first page of that, we have a lovely illustration of a woman teaching children how to read, and there's another hornbook. And because I love you guys so much and I am dedicated to my craft, I did not put myself in debt, but I did go on eBay and I found Felicity's original hornbook. And if I can get this thing to focus, yeah, so you can see that is the alphabet in all caps, no lower cases, and the Lord's Prayer. So she actually has her little hornbook now. See how that fits in there? Perfect. So I had originally planned to actually make a little hornbook with you guys, but I thought it would kind of be a little bit more fun to introduce my love of the American Girl series and have a little fun with Miss Felicity. If you are interested in a tutorial on how to make a hornbook, I would be interested in doing that for you, so let me know. Otherwise, that is all I have for you guys today, except for the parting message. You don't have to give up your childhood hobbies just because you're old. So sometimes it's good to be sentimental about these things so that future generations can look back and say, oh yes, they did care about childhood. And also sometimes our childhood things still have lessons to teach us, even now. It's okay to still be into childish things. That's my message. Go play with your toys that you had when you were a kid. You'll thank me. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.